because it kind of leads us elegantly into the next episode. So
elegantly is a strong word.
It leads us awkwardly. Hi, I'm Stu Willis.
And I'm Jazz Fisher.
And welcome to Draft Zero, a podcast where two screenwriters, emerging filmmakers, what do you want to call us, try to work out what makes great screenplays work.
And welcome to part 3 of our epic deep dive into Antagonists, part 3 of a proposed 5-part series, although who knows where we will end up. This episode is what we've tentatively called Versus Nature Antagonists, where we are doing The Grey, All Is Lost, and Contagion. And I think we'll also be addressing maybe some Supernatural films as well at the end.
I know. I just want to say why Supernatural is, I think, what we will discover / have discovered. I think the reason we want to discuss Supernatural in this episode is Supernatural gets seen as a subset of the versus nature kind of central conflict. But I think what we have discovered in doing this podcast twice is that there is actually some key differences between supernatural antagonists and big picture nature antagonists. And I think it's actually something that I'm going to cue you up to talk about, which is sentience versus non-sentience.
Well, thank you for queuing me up there, Stu. I would just quickly say to our listeners, if you haven't listened to parts 1 and 2, I encourage you to go back and listen to them because we're going to make connections and references to stuff we've already discussed in those parts.
We're very much building on what we've already discussed and refining. I've certainly been doing a lot of thinking over the last however long it's been.
It's cool. We are actually learning as we go with each part, which is interesting. So, yes, we've chosen nature antagonists, and I think the key distinguishing feature of the antagonists that we've selected in these films is that those antagonists are not sentient. They don't have, they don't have agency. They're not making choices. But I think importantly for our protagonists is that they can't be bargained with. That removes the choices that the protagonist can make in terms of dealing with these antagonistic forces. And this is where some supernatural films may come in, is where those antagonists are not sentient. I think the types of supernatural films where they have sentient antagonists, we wouldn't fall into this category of films that we're discussing.
Listen and understand that Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop, ever, until you are dead.
So, I mean, because another way of thinking about versus nature, or at least I'll touch on, is maybe in some ways it's about fate more than it is about another force. I know we're kind of going off tangent a little bit, as we do, but the reason these forces of nature don't have the ability to negotiate is they do not necessarily have wants, or if they do have a want, it is very specific. They're not shifting tactics. They're not shifting goals. The want of the alien is to feed. The want of Leatherface is to kill. They're really primitive, primal desires, unlike the characters in 3 Billboards, in which their wants and goals are very complex, possibly even their wants and needs. And so I think what is interesting, and this is in comparison, the last example I'm going to use about Supernatural is ghost films, because ghost films are often about these inhuman things that have human characteristics, and it's about satisfying their wants. That's how you defeat the ghost. You kind of satisfy its wants. So there is a whole spectrum in there.
And interestingly, I'm going to come back to this later, but as soon as in a ghost film, they figure out what the ghost's want is, and there is a identifiable way of winning for the protagonist, the fear that you feel for the protagonist and the decisions that the protagonists have are completely different.
Yeah. So it seems like a good opportunity to address a question that was sent in by one of our patrons and listeners, Scott, about part 1, which is he sent us a question about the difference between want and need, because apparently we were talking about it a lot.
Hey, fellas. Just wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about what you really think about the idea of want versus need as like a paradigm for character development. The more I do this, the more I think that need is kind of crap. Like, we make it up after the fact. And that what we say the character needs is really what we want the tension to be between what the character wants and what they're going to get. It's almost like there's wants and then there's wants that run counter to those wants, but there's no real needs as far as I can tell. What actually I think creates the better conflict is when wants run counter to other wants, rather than trying to shoehorn things into this idea of need. Okay, I have rambled enough about this. I'd love to hear what you think.
I don't want to entirely get into the question as it relates to development. That feels like it might be something we might come back to in episode 5 or back matter for this whole series. But what I wanted to get into is, I kind of tend to agree with you, Scott, because I've been thinking about the difference between want versus need. Because what I am going to say that is kind of be a running theme in this particular episode is that want is absolutely important for their characters, their goal. What is it that they want? What is it that they're after? The need, I think, is something that you can define more interestingly as a character question. Yeah. And it's something that the character doesn't even have to be aware of. The film can choose a way to frame it, but the character is probably has no idea of their need at all, and probably it's better if they're unconsciously aware and their need is answered by the end of the film. And I think the reason that it is difficult to articulate what the needs are is, as we talked about in our character sequences episode, needs are character questions, which means they are, by nature, kind of fuzzy, but wants can be clearly articulated in a demonstrable form. And the job of the antagonist, this is getting into my thesis of this episode, of the antagonistic forces as a whole, is to pressure the character till they change or until they don't change, until they're thwarted or educated, to use a David Mamet term. And that is their need being fulfilled. But for most of the story, what is driving a scene is the character's wants and the way the antagonistic forces affect those wants. More specifically, in terms of putting obstacles in the way of the characters achieving those goals.
Yeah. I think what you put your finger on, part of me believes that Scott's issue is perhaps with wording, whereas I think the ideas behind the want/need paradigm still work. And
it's interesting that you choose want/need, not want versus need, because I think want versus need, when it gets murky.
Yeah.
Want/need is two separate things for the character, is a much better way to think about it.
Well, the difference, I think you put your finger cleanly on it, is that a lot of the character journeys that we want our protagonists to go through, they aren't aware. So it's not a want. It's not something they're chasing after. It's something that the narrative is pushing them towards. And we've discovered in previous episodes, one of your theses is about the idea of pressure. We're putting our characters under pressure cookers so that they make decisions. They're forced to make decisions that they don't want to make. Now, my thesis was, I think their antagonistic forces can be divided into internal and external forces. So broadly speaking, you've got plot antagonistic forces where, there's more that obstacle to the clearly defined want of a character. And then you've got other antagonistic forces that are going towards changing who the character is internally. And that is an antagonistic force in that it's an agent of change. But as we referred to in part 1, I think Obi-Wan is an antagonistic force onto Luke.
Right. But I think obstacles, of which I want to talk about a lot, the obstacle that goes between the character and their goal isn't the only form of antagonistic force. And maybe the main one in the story, but it's not. For example, I don't think Obi-Wan is an obstacle to Luke getting to his goal. In fact, I would say he's an enabler. He pushes him. Whereas I think pressure presses on a character, and I think obstacles kind of interfere, get in the way of the character. The job of you as a writer is to orchestrate the sequencing of events of the antagonistic forces in such a way that the character is able to continue, right? But you need, whether it's escalation or amplification. So I think Obi-Wan for me is what I'm going to start referring to. I don't know if I start referring to, I think it's more particularly interesting in systems when we get to that in the next topic, which is he is someone that pulls the character towards the goal. He's an enabler. He encourages them. And there is someone that is kind of a dissuader, that is a negative pressure on them. And then there is, I guess, just pressure, which is something that forces them to act. Time, the ticking clock of time is forcing the character to act. It's encouraging them to act. They may not. They may have been stuck in their status quo.
And there are clear, like, physical or emotional obstacles to getting a clearly defined goal. Like, that's the most common form of antagonistic force. But what we're saying is that it's not the only one. And just to summarize very, very briefly, two of our key learnings from the previous parts is, one, the antagonistic force can change scene by scene or even sequence by sequence, depending on not just the antagonistic force, but who the antagonist is and who the protagonist of a particular scene or a particular sequence, depending on the needs of the story. But then also, this was my kind of initial view of Die Hard, and it's been reinforced by the homework that we're about to dive into now, where I think your protagonist's journey is more defined by the antagonistic forces that the protagonist is pitted against than, you know, the wants and needs of the protagonist. Like, without the antagonistic forces, your character, there's no narrative. And you need the antagonistic forces to force your protagonist to make decisions, and those decisions, depending on the choices that the protagonist makes, will lead them on through change or not change. You know, like, to me, in doing this exercise, I think antagonistic forces and antagonists as an idea, as a narrative tool, is actually more important than thinking about protagonists.
Well, I think it's everything. I'm going to just say that quote in full because I found it from David Mamet, because I think we might come back to it. It's interesting, which is, start every time with this is it inviolable? No, inviolable. Start every time with this rule. The scene must be dramatic. It must start because the hero has a problem, and it must culminate with the hero finding him or herself either thwarted or educated that another way exists. But I think thwarted or educated is the best idea. And in fact, I think the pressure of a story as a whole, the antagonistic forces on the character pressure, ultimately leads them to be thwarted or educated at the end of the story, right? Luke Skywalker at the end of A New Hope is educated that another way exists, which is the Force. He makes a choice, which is to push up the little eyepiece and then try, and that's how it's dramatized. But he is educated that the Force exists. You know, that is the culmination of the pressures over the course of the whole story. But individual scenes, as we'll get into, also have antagonistic forces. But it is the building block. Those actually antagonistic forces are, by necessity, is what builds the scene, right? It is the beats, the chain links, the therefore but. The but in the South Park thing of the story being therefore but. The but is the obstacles. So I think that's what I'm going to drive into, and it's why I think we should start with All Is Lost. Because I think what is fantastic about All Is Lost is that almost all the antagonistic forces that most of the film, certainly on a scene level, if not a sequence level, in All Is Lost, are obstacles. They're plot, right? They're plot. The cumulative effect of those antagonistic forces creates a pressure on the character to make a choice at the end of the film, but I think we'll get to that when we actually start getting into it. So,
this is Virginia Jean. An SOS call, over. This is the Virginia Jean with an SOS call. Over.
So All Is Lost is a survival film. J.C. Chandler, who we really love on the podcast, starring Robert Redford as our man who's lost at sea. It's basically a survival film where he wakes up in a yacht that is gaining water because it's collided with a shipping container, and there is basically a series of events that escalate such that not only does he have to get on the life raft, that ultimately he has to hope that he drifts into the way of a shipping channel and is picked up, because otherwise he's got no hope of survival. I'm really simplifying it because in summarizing the film, I'm actually just telling you what happens in this film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very beautifully simple film with very, very little dialogue in it, because it is just our man by himself for the entirety of the film. And the antagonist is pretty much the weather. You know, depending on whether you're a sailing expert or not, his knowledge of sailing. But like, as you say, it's constant escalation. So he wakes up from a freak accident with his boat taking on water. He patches up the boat. The water has damaged his radio. He tries to fix his radio. Then there's a storm. Bits of his ship are broken. It capsizes. Like, he keeps on. It's a very, very plot-oriented film. It's constantly posing the question of, oh shit, what do I do now? And watching him figure it out through constant escalation.
But I'm going to break this down. I'll try and be as quickly as possible, because what I'm saying about obstacles starts right at the very beginning. We'll deal with, actually not right at the very beginning, because there's a bit of VO, which I think is important because it creates context, but we might come back to that. Which is that I think there is a super goal or a super objective, to use the acting term, which is he is in a boat. He is going on a destination. We have to assume he is heading somewhere, that he's not planning to be on the boat until forever.
But we don't know that.
But we don't know that. But I think there is probably it's a boat. It's going somewhere. You know, it's not the
all we
boat
know
that
about him is that he's wealthy enough to afford to be on a boat in the middle of nowhere, that he's quite elderly, and that he's white and speaks English. And
married. He's wearing a wedding. In fact, he's wearing rings on both, whether he's like European, right hand or the left hand. He's got fingers on both, so you won't miss it. So there's the idea that there's obviously something going along. But what I want to get to is that there is that overall goal. Just for once, agree with me, Chaz, that there is the implication that there is a destination. Whether his destination is an emotional one of him running away from whatever the problem is that he's running away from.
To me, that is definitely more of the super objective. Is actually to be alone in the middle of the ocean is more his objective.
Because the question becomes then, why does he fight? If he just wants to be alone and drift around in the ocean forever until he dies, why does he fight so hard to survive?
And that's an interesting question.
I mean, that also taps into the grey. But what I want to get into is
and I think that's a question that's answered by the I think that's why the opening VO is so important.
Yes. But getting into the plot specifics, because I kind of want to identify what these obstacles are doing and maybe over-identifying it, which is the opening scene is him asleep. His goal is to stay asleep. But the obstacle comes in, and it's the water coming in and waking him up. And that leads him to go outside to see why the boat is taken on water. And then, but there is the obstacle of the shipping container not just having collided with the boat, but it is stuck to the side of the boat. They're kind of forced together. Therefore, he kind of has to go and get a sea anchor and attach it to the shipping container to pull it away, because he adds drag to it with the sea anchor. And then he can tilt the boat so it doesn't take on water, and then he comes around and collects the sea anchor again. That goal of no longer warding is needed, but then that creates the next problem, which it identifies by the end of this sequence with a top-down shot of him on a makeshift hammock, which is the boat is still full of water. So then the question becomes, he needs to get rid of the water, right? Next series of...
and the electrics of the boat are out, so he has to hand pump it all out.
Yeah, so there is his success. He manages to hand pump out all the water. Right, and then he starts drying things. But then when he realizes he's got the opportunity to get the radio working by basically connecting it to the electrics on the top of the mast, he climbs at the mast, which is kind of like a mini thing anyway with like how does he climb the mast, and then he sees in the distance a storm. And then we start the next sequence, which is he needs to do this, but there is a storm. Right? So he goes... Let me continue. I know you want to hurry up.
Are you going to go through the entire...
No. Because I want to show, but this is the structure. Therefore, there's a storm. Therefore, he has to put on the storm sail. But he's thrown off the boat. He's got a tether to the boat, though, and pulls himself on the board. The boat gets capsized. He manages to claw out again, but he's thrown off a second time, and this is escalation. He's actually thrown off the second time, but this second time he has no tether, and because the boat's mast is busted, right? He has to swim around the sails. It's a lot more dangerous, even though it's the same beat. And the capsizing beat in the boat is repeated in the second half of the film when he's in the life raft, but it's obviously a lot more dangerous in the life raft, and he's forced to actually make a choice with that life raft beat, which is that the whole life raft capsizes and he has to make the decision to unzip and swim out underneath it and flip it over. But essentially there is this whole series of goal, obstacle, the goal is kind of mostly completed, but there's a new obstacle, right? And there's one kind of coincidence. There's actually a couple of coincidences, but there's one coincidence, and I think coming back to our coincidences episode is useful to think about, which is basically once he's kind of, the boat's all corrected and kind of storm seems somewhat to be dying down. He sees that the boat, the repair that he's done on the hull has come off, and he goes to repair it, and something smacks in the back of his head, and he is blacked out. And I think the reason, thinking about this in just terms of pure obstacles, that works, even though it's a coincidence, is the coincidence is the obstacle, right? Does that make sense? And if we go back to those coincidences episode, all those things about putting your character more in trouble, it's about the coincidences are the obstacle to them achieving their goal.
Arguably, the weather is a coincidence. The fact that the storm keeps coming back, the fact that his boat capsizes, the fact that his life raft capsizes.
Yeah, and it shifts his goal from the goal, at least in the first part of the film, being, can I keep the boat afloat and get where I'm going? And that's answer. He is thwarted at the middle of the film when he gets on the life raft. This is the structure of the film, which is therefore goal, but obstacle.
But what I want to take from this is try to boil it down to lessons that writers can use in other contexts, where I think you can boil his decision down to the fact of, do I fight or do I give up? As you say, educated or thwarted. Because, and this is important because of the context of the end of the film.
That's his character choice. His character choice in every beat is, do I survive or do I
keep fighting or not? Yeah. And this film, it builds and builds and builds the forces, the antagonistic forces, the escalation, until it gets to a point where the end of the film is him choosing to give up and sink beneath the waves, right? It's important to note that the context of this film is a series of character decisions. Like, it's a very plot-oriented film because he's not talking to anyone. We don't know anything about him. And yet we're relating to him because he is someone who is constantly being asked, do you fight for your life or not? And there's no negotiating with the weather. He does have a lot of... he's presented with the feeling of agency in the face of insurmountable, undefeatable odds because of these many obstacles that he keeps overcoming, until he gets so tired of overcoming them that he just slips beneath the waves and gives up. Now, I say that because that is the character
need. It's the writer's need for the character, that they need to orchestrate the sequence of events.
Correct.
So his character is basically pushed to the breaking point where he's made that choice and he chooses to give up. And then he may be saved in that choice, but at that point he gave up. But, and this is, and I'm going to let you talk about it because I think it is the orchestration, the choosing of this particular series of beats, starting with him thinking he has fresh, actually, even though that's the kind of the first weakness when he thinks he has fresh water because he took a plastic bottle and filled it up in the kitchen and comes to drink some water and then realizes after all this shit that he's been through that it's filled with salt water. And he's broken for the first time, and then he realizes he can make a solar still. But more important, that kind of sets up this last part of the film where you kind of start to feel I think he starts feeling a lot more defeated, which is
he writes the goodbye letter that is the VO that's read out at the beginning, or at least I assume it's the VO that's read out in the beginning.
13th of July, 4:50 p.m. I'm sorry. I know that means little at this point, but I am. I tried. I think you would all agree that I tried to be true, to be strong, to be kind, to love, to be right. But I wasn't. And I know you knew this in each of your ways. And I am sorry. All is lost here, except for soul and body. That is what's left of them. And a half-day's ration. It's inexcusable, really. I know that now. How it could have taken this long to admit that, I'm not sure, but it did. I fought till the end. I'm not sure what that is worth, but know that I did. I have always hoped for more for you all. I will miss you. I'm sorry.
So it's the only piece of communication we have between him and someone else. And I think it's fascinating that they start with that VO. That VO does a lot of heavy lifting for the film because, as you say, it gives us some measure of understanding of the character that he's running from something and regrets not being able to resolve it. And that's super important because he's been faced with this life or death scenario. And I think that VO gives us the reason why he keeps on fighting.
Gives us access to the character, yes.
And without that VO, we wouldn't have it. And as you said, the trawler beat. So he gets to the shipping lane. He MacGyvers the fuck out, whether you think he's incompetent or not. The fact that he actually, it's even more impressively MacGyvering if you think he's incompetent. He gets to the shipping lane and sees not one but two trawlers go past him while he's using his flares to draw their attention.
Help! Help! There!
And what is important to note is you never see inside the trawlers. You never see crew.
Hey, that's my observation.
Yeah, it is your observation. I thought that's what you were queuing me up to do.
No, I'm going to keep my good observations. I'm going to take that back now.
Okay.
I'm going to bring up... Yes, he's the trawlers. Actually, no, I'll let you point out that we don't see into them because I think it'll come back to how I wrap it up.
Yeah.
Please, I'll let you have this one, Jazz. Just take it.
Do you want me to cue you up in a transition?
No, just stay. No. Just talk about the... you can say the trawlers we don't see inside, that they're like a force of nature. I'm assuming that's what you're about to say.
Yeah. Okay. So these two trawlers go past and they just move on and he's left abandoned. But importantly, we never see inside the trawlers. We never see a human sentient character inside, either asleep or listening to music and not seeing him. You never see someone making a choice. Yeah, there you go.
Because, making a choice. Because, and I know I did a breakdown of these obstacles. The reason this is versus nature, that this is the central conflict, what we're talking about, the central conflict, is that the source of all this pressure is nature. It is shit out, like it is these boats that are indifferent. It is the shark that eats his fish. It is the storm that capsizes him twice. None of these actually have a want. They don't have a need. None of them have a want or a particular goal.
None of them can be negotiated with.
Yeah, that's why this is a versus nature, because ultimately they're indifferent to his struggle, and they've gone out of their way in telling that story. There is a version of All Is Lost, like a Misery, where there is someone trying to find his boat because there's a distress call. There is a moment where we go inside the ship and there is someone trying to convince their captain to turn around. They're all versions of the story that could have been written, but J.C. Chandler has made a very significant choice that all the antagonistic forces in this film, or at least the obstacles, are going to be coming from nature. There is an antagonistic force within him, right, which is this question of, do I give up or do I not? Actually, I mean, maybe, is that an antagonistic force? I don't know.
Well, I think... I don't know whether it's a force. It's not guiding him to do anything, but he's fighting for something, and the pressures on him keep making him make that decision over and over again. Do I give up now or do I fight? Do I give up now or do I fight? And they make him do it again and again and again and again, ever escalating, ever creating more pressure, ever making it harder to make that decision to fight until he does give up.
And he gives up after he has no more flares. He's all out of options, and he starts a fire on his life raft to attract this fishing trawler, and the fire gets out of control, and he's forced to jump in the water.
He burns his solar still, so even though the fire does get out of control, he's made the decision.
Yeah, you're right. This is like a do or die, but he literally is out of options at that point. It goes that far. What's he going to float on?
Yeah.
And he kind of gives up.
I think he could have thrown the fire overboard. That's what I was thinking at the time. He's setting a fire because he's out of flares, and then he just keeps burning shit. I think like there's a real active choice in terms of an active dramatization of him giving up.
Yes,
or
he's
throwing
burning
it all
everything.
in.
Yeah, it's all in. He's got nothing else left. If this doesn't work, he's fucked. He's already kind of realizing he's drifting out of the shipping lanes anyway. Yeah.
But I just want to go back to an observation you made in part 1 when we'd watched this movie and we'd watched Misery, and you said that after watching Misery, you felt that you understood or had more understanding of the character of our man, a nameless character who barely has any lines of dialogue that aren't swearing at the elements, than you had of Paul Sheldon, a character who we spend almost the entirety of a film locked in the room with another character. And to me, that's kind of a pivotal element of this nature antagonist is that, like, I'm going to kind of, as you alluded to earlier, we've made, this is a re-recording, and I think part of it is because Paul Sheldon, because he could negotiate with Annie Wilkes, you kind of got the feeling that if he just went along writing misery novels locked in her bedroom for the rest of his life,
he'd survive.
He would live. Whereas because Annie Wilkes has identifiable goals, obstacles, wants, needs, whatever you want to call them, he can negotiate with her. Our man cannot negotiate with the weather.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure I think I know him in terms of I could write our man's bibliography or obituary in the same way I could write, I don't know, Paul Sheldon's obituary. But I think because there is this kind of essential, almost primal need to survive in him that you can kind of connect to him, and the performance is better. So I don't know if I agree with that statement now, but there is certainly a sense of him. I guess maybe it just comes back to that opening voiceover, which is that it kind of sets up this idea that there is there's a character question about him. There's no character question about Paul. Paul has a goal, which is to get home. So does our man, but there is no desire, the film does not ask a question about his character in a way that it asks the question about our man.
Agreed. That's the thing. You know what the lengths that our man will go to survive, in a way that obviously Paul goes to great lengths to survive Annie Wilkes, but we don't know what his limits are. We don't know what his breaking point is.
So speaking of good-looking middle-aged men in in kind of remote places that test their character, should we move on to the Grey?
Yeah, I think the Grey is an interesting subcategory of these versus nature antagonists, where there's a team of people that is pitted against a nature antagonist, instead of, you know, Gravity or All Is Lost, where
127 hours.
127, yeah, where it's just one person.
A job at the end of the world. I work security, protecting men from the dangers they cannot see. There's not a second goes by when I'm not thinking of you in some way.
Going home, guys. Let's keep it moving.
We need a fire. Then we find food. If we don't move and work now, we'll all freeze to death.
Somebody will find us.
They gotta know that plane went off the radar.
Nobody's gonna find us. Not here. We figure out what way is south and we start walking.
This will be one of those wild stories you tell at a party.
Listen, get up, get up.
Don't move. Stare right back at him. If we can get to that tree line, we can better defend ourselves.
Go! Hold on!
You gotta be kidding me.
We can climb down.
Following a river, we got a better chance of finding shelter. How are we gonna deal with this?
We take them on, one at a time.
So the Grey is set in, I believe, Alaska. It's set around I believe, an oil drilling operation, and a group of men who fly in and fly out of this work. And in the opening voiceover, it says that these men...
Ex-cons, fugitives, drifters, assholes. Men unfit for mankind.
We have a lead character in John Otway, played by Liam Neeson, who is he doesn't work with these men. He's even more alone because he's someone who protects the men from the wildlife. He's a hunter who, hunts wolves and bears and things that may attack the rig. All the men are flying home for their break, and the plane crashes. And it crashes into the hunting zone of a pack of wolves, the titular Grey of the film. And the wolves go picking off the men one by one.
The goal is very specific, which is they want to move out. One, they need to, their super objective is to obviously survive, but to do that, the tangible goal is to move such that they're outside of the territory of the wolves.
I would say even before they are in the, I can't even remember if it's before or after the wolves' first attack, but John Otway very early on suggests that they need to move because they're not going to be found before they die. Whether it's because of the wolves or because it's because of the freezing cold, the lack of food, what have you.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, which is, do you think, it's an observation that I'm going to frame as a question, which is, do you think the film opens more or less with a character question?
I was fascinated rewatching this film, looking at it through this lens, that the film opens with John Otway walking away from the rig at night, putting the gun to his rifle to his head and contemplating suicide. And he chooses in that moment at the very beginning of the film to not kill himself. So I think that very much poses a character question because it's hardly a plot question. It's not like someone else is holding the gun to his head. So it poses the character question of, let me try and see if I can frame it quite precisely, is, does John Otway want to live?
Okay. It's interesting you stretch to try to be precise when I think what it makes these questions, character questions, interesting is their fluffiness, because it's like he wants to live. Like on a dramatic level, He does. Like, it's, as in, he's demonstrated his desire to live, which is that he doesn't pull the trigger. It is, I guess, the question for me is it's like, why doesn't, like, it's kind of things like, why doesn't he pull the trigger? Why did he think about doing it in the first place?
Yeah.
Like, will he find the will to live? Because for me, even though we haven't seen it ritualized, this isn't shame. We don't see multiple versions of this scene where he does the same thing. There is this sense that this was not a one-off desire, that he possibly is like Riggs in Lethal Weapon and puts this gun in his mouth every so often and thinks about pulling the trigger. And so the character question is, will his behavior change? Will there be a point when he no longer does that? And a small observation I'm going to make about obstacles with that particular shot, and this will come more to our other antagonists, is what I found interesting rewatching it, is the shot of him putting the rifle in his mouth literally interrupts the sequence of the voiceover when he's writing the letter. The shot itself is a form of kind of interruption. It's just kind of like a small thing, but it's a stylistic choice that they've made because there is kind of no antagonist in this opening, right? There is none of that drama, but they've found
himself.
Other than himself. But because really the first obstacle and kind of goal is this plane takes off with obviously the goal to land safely with this plane full of men, and it's but for the obstacle, which is the plane crashing, it would have happened.
Yeah.
And then that sets the rest of the story. And I think I'm just going to break it. There's two forms of antagonism here that nature is expressed. There is the obstacles of the environment itself, the blizzard, the coldness, the water,
the cliff.
The cliff is, I mean, that's a great example. So there's basically this point of the film when they realize they can hear a river, they're near logging trees, and they keep on walking, and they come to a cliff, and there is literally a gap, a chasm that they have to leap across.
You gotta be shitting me.
The river must be a good size if we can hear it all the way up here.
At least if we're following a river, we got a better chance of finding shelter.
Who's climbing down that?
I can't. There's no way I can do that.
Well, we can't go back. There's no way we can go back. Those trees, though.
What trees?
Right out there. Got a tether of some kind? Secure it between here and there? We can climb down. Guys, it's simple. It's the wolves or those trees.
You're not talking about jumping off the cliff.
It's an idea. I didn't say it was a good one.
Importantly, one person has to leap across with the rope that allows the others to get across safely. And I say that's important because that's one of the characters making a sacrifice for the benefit of the group, which, as we delve into the antagonistic forces of the wolves, I think is the point of the film and the point of choosing the wolves as being the antagonistic force.
So I think the wolves kind of feel like a force of nature because I don't think there's a sense of you being able to defeat the wolves or negotiate them. In fact, they go on, one of them asks...
Why would they? I mean, we're not harming them. It's not for food. We're a threat. We don't belong here. That's it.
So there's this sense of them kind of being not supernatural, though they're meant to be... The wolves themselves are meant to feel like bigger and scarier. It's this sense of that they can't negotiate with these things.
They're undefeatable. Right? The only way they can give them what they want is with their deaths.
Yes, or to leave their territory, which has deliberately no clearly defined boundaries. So they're not like a normal monster movie like, I don't know, Dog Soldiers, to speak of wolves, or even Alien, where the film will end with the death of the wolves. I don't think that's ever a question the film pretends is an answer, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think so. They do kill a wolf during the film, and I think it's only near the end where it really becomes clear that they're an undefeatable antagonist.
Okay,
but it's by the by. I think you're largely correct in that they are presented as an obstacle, an antagonistic force that cannot be negotiated with. Just to put it in the context of these films, but. I find it fascinating that as you say, John Otway, the beginning of the film presents him with a character question of, do I give up, do I die, or do I keep living? very clearly dramatized. Binary choice. Do I pull the trigger or do I not pull the trigger? But from the moment that the crash happens, he is constantly presented with that choice again, and as are every other member of this small and ever-dwindling group of men fighting to survive, they're constantly presented with that choice, and he never once considers giving up, striking out on his own. It's almost like that decision that he's made at the beginning. To me, my read was not the same as yours, where that it was part of his ritual of his life. To me, it was a more binding, permanent decision that then gets tested for the rest of the movie.
Oh, interesting.
And tellingly, the end of the movie is, and again, I'm going to do the end of the movie so that we can talk about other bits of it in context of the whole journey of the film.
I think that's actually useful, because in fact, what the writer is trying to do here, I'm assuming that they knew what the ending was, is they're orchestrating their antagonistic forces so the ending works.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a craft lesson. They're having to put pressure on the character so much, but in the right order, so he has reaches this final destination.
Yeah.
So he's educated or thwarted.
Correct. And the ending of the film, which was misleadingly actually revealed in the trailers such that the people went to the film expecting to see Wolf Puncher the movie, because it ends with him
punching a wolf.
He's lost all of his friends, and he's taping up broken glass bottles into his fists so that he's getting ready to fight. And throughout the movie, he's quoted a poem that was written by his father.
Yes, but that conflict only comes to the front because of the pressure placed on them by both the wolves and the environment itself. And in fact, this is an observation, I think this is true of other ensemble films, that the deaths of those within the group are actually a form of pressure. They don't put an obstacle. The death of the first character, the funny guy.
Oh, I think that's the second one, because the first one to get taken by the wolves is the guy who's on watch.
Yes. I mean, it's an interruption. So, he's meant to be on watch and then he dies. But they find him the next morning. They could have done, he's dead. We have to find someone else to do watch. They find him after. That puts pressure on the group, such as Otway saying they need to leave the crash site, which then prompts Diaz, who is more or less the leading character antagonist for Otway, to question Otway's leadership.
Yeah, you don't know. And nobody nominated you shit, by the way. It's getting to that point in the evening, girls. Fucking teach his own.
What the fuck are you talking about? Diaz, come on, man. You wouldn't last 5 fucking minutes out here.
I survived that. This ain't shit. I find a way through, with or without.
Fuck it. I'm gonna take whatever I can carry and head into those trees.
And so that first death changes the goal, pushes them into action, which is we need to now run for the trees, but then also brings out the interpersonal conflict, which is Diaz, right? And then Flannery dies. So then they run to these trees and Flannery dies by wolves, right? And then they have to, as night falls, they have to run to the trees. But Flannery's death is not an obstacle for them. They don't try to retrieve the body or anything like that. It's an additional form of pressure. Each death is just increasing the pressure on that group just that ever little bit, to the point where Diaz, as I identified, Diaz is the clear interpersonal antagonizer of Otway. He's the one that questions Otway's decisions. He antagonizes everyone. He's like, wants whiskey. It's not a fucking vote. Whatever his name is wants to ration the alcohol. Diaz is like, I don't want you to ration it. Like, he's challenging everyone. He wants to go alone. He kind of, in a way, represents Otway's selfish or isolation in the beginning of the film, because that's the big shift. The crash itself has forced Otway in a position where he has to care for others again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just Otway. All the men in this group, they are men that are unfit for mankind, and they have to learn to act as a pack. And I use the word pack for obvious reasons, but I think also in each of their deaths represent, instead of Otway being presented with the choice, it's like these men are vicariously making it dramatically on Otway's behalf. You've got the man who can't run fast enough. You've got the man who just gives up and dies in his sleep. You've got the man, who dies fantasizing about his daughter because he wants to reconnect with family and not be unfit for mankind. They are all their deaths are representations of decisions that Otway could take and is not taking. These other men are making it on his behalf. Otway choosing to forge on is not, is being dramatized kind of through these other men's decisions. But I want to talk about the choice of the wolves as a singular kind of nature antagonist, because you and I have talked about this film before and how, it could have been wolves and then bears and then dragons and then viruses. The choices, they made a singular nature antagonist. And
yes,
in one of the previous parts of this 5-part podcast, asked the question of what obstacles is the antagonist providing, defining that as a plot antagonist. How is the antagonistic force pushing the protagonist to change, being an internal character antagonist? And finally, how does the antagonist mirror the protagonist's journey? And if you look in this film briefly as the group of men being the protagonist, not just John Otway, the pack of wolves is the diametric opposite to this group of men. They hunt as a pack, and the men are a group of individuals who are all fighting one another and questioning one another. The pack have an alpha, and it's only kind of as they accept John Otway as an alpha do they start gaining some successes. There's one particular sequence at a campfire where Diaz, the other human vying for the alpha male role, who, as you said, is constantly challenging Otway.
But he's not an alpha male leader. He's an alpha male every man for himself.
Yes.
Alpha
yeah,
male.
Agreed. Yeah.
I'm scared shitless.
That's because you're a punk. I don't walk through this world with fear in my heart.
You picked that up in the pen? Somebody scribbled that on the day room wall?
You better take it easy, motherfucker.
Talking tough means jack shit now. You're not scared? You're a fool. Worse, you're a fucking liar.
I should have checked your chin at the fucking plane. Get up. Come on, get up, you big Irish fuck. You want to knuckle up?
Come on, we don't have
Get
time
the
for
fuck off. Shut up.
away.
Shut up, you chicken shits make me sick.
It finally breaks down between John Otway and Diaz fighting, fist fighting, physically fighting.
I'm gonna show you how this is done. Put your fucking hands up. Oh, you motherfucker! Cut this shit out. Do you hear me?
It is no narrative coincidence that is the point that a wolf chooses to attack when the group is at its weakest. Now, interestingly, they've chosen for that wolf to be an outcast from the pack. It attacks by itself.
The Amiga.
The alpha has ejected from the pack. That wolf attacks by itself, and it is the only wolf that the group kill, because Diaz accepts Otway as the alpha. It is acting as an individual, and the men kill it because they act as a pack. They are no longer unfit for mankind. They are working together.
And so, with the interpersonal conflict resolve, where do they go from here? They have to put more pressure on the characters. So one of the men dies during the night, who is Burke. And this is an example of pressure, because I'm going to try to use it as much as he's been saying that there is obstacles because of the nature. It's less plotty than All Is Lost. Burke dies from altitude sickness or whatever. But we can see that this puts pressure on Otway. Yeah. Which is basically he is shaking Burke, going, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
Doing CPR, I think.
No, I just think it looks like he's in despair that Burke died and he didn't have the opportunity to save him. And I think this connects to his wife, because there is a little bit of mystery threaded through the film which is an audience question because he was writing this letter at the beginning, and we assume that and the film is deliberately withholds information, and then reveals that all these shots of him and his wife, she's actually in a hospital bed and getting intravenous and all that stuff. So it's a slow reveal, but you can see the force, the pressure building on Otway, right? And this is when they come to the ravine, and the antagonistic forces are put, and how they relate to choice are very simply put when I can't remember which character says it's the wolves or the trees. I think it's Otway. Otway pretty much articulates all the antagonism.
Yeah. He also articulates the goals.
Yeah, and yeah, he does. The wolves at this point, I mean, they're obviously tangible, but in that very moment of that scene, they're a pressure. They're like the ticking clock. At some point, they will arrive. Will we wait? Hendricks the one who jumps over, and this is a good little example of how you can put obstacle on top of obstacle to create a little set piece, which is they have to tie everything together to create this tether, and then Hendrick has to jump to the other side holding this makeshift rope. Right? And then the others are holding
Which I alluded to
and
before is Hendrick risking his own life for the group.
His life.
Which is not something that Hendrick or Otway would have done prior to this plane crash.
And it's a character choice as a result of the pressures being placed on them. But then in this little plot piece, the tether comes apart, 2 of the rope pieces, and I think it's Diaz grabs one, but then Diaz hurtles forward, and then what happens, he stops, and then the peak of the ledge breaks underneath him, and he starts falling, and then the group have to grab him. So that is, he needs to get to the other side, but for the fact that the tether is broken. Goal, grab the tether, obstacle, ledge. What I'm trying to lead to is that they've got these plot things, but ultimately you then got these moments of pressure. Diaz decides that he can't go on. He's got this knee from an injury from falling off the tree, and he decides to actually give up. He is, in a way, Diaz has always been the shadow of Otway. He's like Otway's worst instincts, his isolationism, his aggression, his anger, his atheism in a way. Like you've got the religious character who I think is Hendrick, and then you've got the atheist character, which is Diaz, and them talking about fate. They're kind of in a way representing Otway's internal conflicts, right? This is kind of how they've dramatized it. And then Diaz decides to die.
It's one of the most touching deaths out of all of this.
Then this is the killer that I've been trying to get to. Hendrick reveals that he saw Otway at the bar.
Oh, no. Yeah.
With your rifle.
Did you follow me?
No. But I never thought I'd see you alive again.
Hendrick's knowledge that he's being holding on to is actually a force of pressure on Otway. And you can see that Otway's reaction to which is...
Really doesn't matter now, does it?
No, I don't suppose it does.
Joe Carnahan has decided specifically to put that scene, that moment, that revelation there because it pushes Otway in the last part of the film, right? Yep. And then obviously Hendrick dies, and again you've got similar kind of set
hold on, before we just gloss over Hendrick. Like it's the last death of all the group other than Otway, and it's someone that Otway came to care about. He doesn't give up. He's just sort of taken by chance, and Otway is fighting to save this man, screaming, "Hold your breath!"
Jesus, please don't do this.
And it's, to me, I think a representation of Otway fighting to save his wife, or the Otway being confronted with the pointlessness of fighting and yet still choosing to fight.
Yes. I don't know if I have much more. Oh, well, I suppose that leads to that final choice, right? So we've led you back to that idea where he is the only one left. There is actually a pressure on him. His goal at the beginning was to take this group of men to safety. Now he's actually lost all of that. Yeah. All is lost for him, for Otway. And what's his decision when he then, he kind of, and it's beautifully dramatized. He puts down all the wallets, he looks through these photos, connects to these people, and then he stumbles into the den of wolves. And then makes the decision to be, John Otway, wolf puncher. But it's an important choice because he doesn't give up. He is going to fight to the last. And that is a result of all the pressures that's been very carefully orchestrated. But it also comes across the characters. Diaz mentions this. It's fate, right? There is a sense of fate in this. The wolves being there, fate. The ship coming, the plane coming down there, fate. That's how they've tested him. It's fate. As opposed to, I don't think there's any, as opposed to the films we looked in the first two parts. I don't think what is happening in Shame is fate. I don't think what is happening in Monster is fate, or at least how the film chooses to frame it.
And it feels fated because the antagonists are not presented as having choice. It's not that antagonists choosing to do this to the protagonists.
And that changes the tone. I mean, it makes it scarier. And I think what I'm going to talk about briefly to finish it off, but I think thinking about pressure on a group of characters, if you have an ensemble, is very interesting. And what does that pressure do? If you think of the ensemble as a singular character, what does that make that ensemble think? What would Starship Enterprise do as a group?
Yeah.
I think we can, and speaking of groups, I mean, I think that's actually a really good way to move into Contagion, because Contagion's about a single antagonist affecting a bunch of different people, but they're not an ensemble, they're disconnected. And I think that is what makes it really interesting to look at.
For those of you not following the Stu Willis Guide to Pronunciation, he's actually referring to Contagion.
I'm sorry, she failed to respond.
Can I go talk to her?
Your wife is dead.
What are you talking about? What happened to her?
Could someone weaponize the bird flu? Someone doesn't have to. The birds are doing that.
In 3 months, it's 1 billion sick. That's where we're headed.
People will panic. The virus will be the least of our worries. It will tip over. I'm gonna get you home.
I got people too, Dr. Cheever. We all do.
Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anyone. Stay away from other people.
Get back in your car. We're not sick!
It's figuring us out faster than we're figuring it out.
It's mutating.
I rewatched it this afternoon, and it is a truly terrifying movie. I've forgotten just how terrifying it is, but it is essentially positing the creation of a new virus that has quite a high mortality rate, and it follows a number of different characters.
4, 5, 6, 7, 6 to 7 main characters, I would say.
Yeah, and probably more sub-characters as well, and uses them as the dramatization of how the world falls apart and then subsequently puts itself back together again in the face of this terrifying thing. And it is, as you say, it's a single source of antagonism where the rules are fairly clear and laid down at various points.
Yeah, they specifically tell us how the virus works, its speed of operation, and what are the consequences for that.
Yeah, there's even a whiteboard moment.
Yeah.
What we need to determine is this. For every person who gets sick, how many other people are they likely to infect? So, for seasonal flu, that's usually about 1. Smallpox, on the other hand, it's over 3. Now, before we had a vaccine, polio spread at a rate between 4 and 6. Now, we call that number the R0. R stands for the reproductive rate of the virus.
What is fascinating about the film is the different characters dealing with this. I mean,
yeah, because I think in contrast to The Grey, this is a film with a large number of characters, but they're not a single They're not an ensemble. They're not a group which is pressurized and then we see one survivor, same as in Alien.
Yeah, very few of them interact with each other.
Yeah. In a way, it's more like Jurassic Park, in which that we follow multiple threads. But yeah, there's even less crossover.
I'd say it's more like Love Actually.
Yeah, we may revisit this film if we do hyperlink cinema, which is this idea of, large ensemble films. Because this is a single source of, to use my term, pressure. And then even though it's an antagonistic force, and we understand, and that we'll learn through the events of what it does, there are multiple characters whose stories that we follow. And I think it's interesting to look at how the film uses the single antagonist of the virus to put pressure onto these characters and explore different responses.
You've proposed, and I think this is the best way to tackle this film, is to talk about each of the characters and what are their sources of antagonism and how are they sources of antagonism to other characters.
Yeah, there is Matt Damon, who plays Mitch Emhoff, who is the husband of the Gwyneth Paltrow character, Beth, who dies.
She failed to respond. Okay. And her heart stopped, and unfortunately, she did die.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Emhoff.
I know this is hard to accept.
Okay. Can I go talk to her?
Mr. Emhoff, I'm sorry. Your wife is dead.
I mean, I just saw her. We were just at home.
There's Lawrence Fishburne, who is Dr. Ellis Cheever.
Is he the head of the CDC?
Which is the Center for Disease Control.
From here on out, I want no one working on this except the PSL-4. The last thing we need is for this thing to walk out of the lab on the bottom of someone's ship.
And there's Kate Winslet, who plays Dr. Erin Mears, an epidemic.
I'm an epidemic intelligence service officer, and I'm here from Atlanta to find out what happened to Beth Emhoff.
She's like a logistician for a pandemic. She also works for the CDC, but she's kind of like on the coalface. She's a field worker.
We're isolating the sick and quarantining those who we believe were exposed.
And then there's Dr. Ali Hextall, played by Jennifer Earle.
What do we got?
A young woman in Minnesota recently traveled to China. Son also died. As of this morning, 87 cases, 15 deaths.
Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
I worked.
You? Really?
Texas. Salmonella.
Ooh.
Pretty limited.
Mine was great, thanks.
There's Jude Law, who plays Alan Grumman. Jude Law playing Alan, who's a conspiratorial thing who runs some website.
Typical of a paramyxa virus,
Godzilla,
potentially
King
a
Kong,
mutant on
and Frankenstein,
all
in
Hold
one.
on, shit, I'll call you back.
And you've got it in there, haven't you?
Oh, really? Look,
Where did it
get
come
away
from
here, Alan.
Military,
You're not a doctor and you're not a
modified
writer.
organism. Yes, I am a writer. Yes, I am.
Blogging is not writing. It's graffiti with punctuation.
I am a journalist, and there's informed discussion on the blogosphere that this is a biological weapon.
So there's a lot of characters, but they all kind of set up differently and then put under pressure differently. And I think it's worth just quickly talking through about how that single source of antagonism pressurizes each of these characters and forces them to make choices.
Well, I'll start with the easiest one, which is the Matt Damon character, because he is just basically there to represent what it's like being an everyday person in the apocalyptic nature of this Contagion story. So he ends up being immune to the disease, but his daughter, within the first 5 minutes of the film, he loses his wife and his stepson, and it's brutal. But as someone with a son the age of Matt Damon's son's character, and he goes to the hospital with his wife who's having a seizure. She dies while he's in the hospital, but on his way back home, his son has died alone and in bed, and he just comes back to find his son's body in bed, and it's just awful. His journey is to protect his daughter from being infected, to feed her, because at some point there's a breakdown of nurses, fire departments, police, there's mass lootings, there's lack of food, lack of resources, and his job is just to keep his daughter from being infected and experiencing what it would be like on the ground. He's the representation of the everyman in in this world.
How do you put that character under pressure if his goal is to keep his daughter safe? She basically starts... One
of the sources of antagonism is she's got a boyfriend who keeps wanting to kiss her.
He basically, the kid likes her, and whether they're boyfriend or girlfriend. And she's a teenage girl and wants to have a boyfriend. And so that's a source of pressure.
I messed up my snow angel.
I'm fine, Jory. If neither of us have it, then we can't give it to each other.
Get away from me.
Dad!
Get away! Get away!
Dad! What are you doing?
Stay there! Go home, Andrew!
The fascinating thing is, the sources of antagonism change. Like, they actually develop a vaccine and everyone can see the world putting itself back together, but it hasn't yet. And she wants to go outside. And he still won't let her go outside because the disease is still not out there and there's a lottery and she's not going to get the vaccine for another 164 days.
Maybe I'm immune like you and I don't even need it.
That's not a chance we're going to take.
So instead we lose spring, we lose summer, we lose another 144 days that don't happen again.
Do you think it forces him to make a choice? What's the choice that he's forced to make? If he's put under pressure, there's obviously little sequences to do with them needing to steal for food, him getting out the gun. I don't want to go into detail, but there's as you say, they're going into the chemist trying to get stuff that they believe is going to make them better, which is connected to the Jude Law character. They have to get food from the back of trucks. There is someone that is stealing and potentially shooting people over, plus the boyfriend. All this stuff puts pressure on his want and need to keep his daughter safe.
I think this film is an excellent example of it's a very task-oriented film. There's not very much inner challenge to all these characters. They're all, I think, very much the same at the end of the movie as they are at the beginning, much like Our Man, but they're just put under intense pressure to survive and to, the movie goes through different scenes about, first it's about containing the virus, and then the sequence is about finding a cure, and then the sequence is about, we found the cure, but let's distribute the cure. So within every single scene, what's fascinating about it is nearly every scene is an expo dump, but every scene has conflict, and that's from the source of antagonism. So rather than boiling it down to a scene point, I think we've got a fairly clear idea of what Matt Damon's, he doesn't have...
How it pressures. It constantly keeps the pressure where ultimately he relents and lets his daughter, before she's had her vaccination, doesn't he let her go on a prom date with...
but he's had his vaccination. He throws a prom for her in her house.
Okay.
So he keeps her safe. He doesn't give up, but the reason why you totally get those sources of antagonism is because in the first 5 minutes of the movie, he loses his wife and stepson.
Yeah.
I think what I missed is what Matt Damon is as a character in that film. He's constantly seeing the society fall apart around him and people making what I'd say is quote unquote bad moral decisions. He's seeing riots. He's seeing people push over old ladies. He's seeing people break into other people's houses and murder each other and steal their shit. He's constantly being presented with that as an option, in the same way that John Otway was constantly being presented with different variations of not fighting for another day. Matt Damon is constantly presented with the option of being a bad an amoral or an immoral being, and he is constantly choosing to be to take the right choice in the face of ever escalating odds of being a good man.
Yes. And Lawrence Fishburne character, the Dr. Ellis Cheever, he is the head of the CDC. I guess the main thing is to do, is the split between his duties as the head of the CDC and his relationship with his fiancée.
I think he's actually possibly the one with the character with the most sources of antagonism. In the initial sequence of the film, he's the direct supervisor of Kate Winslet's character, the logistician, and she ends up contracting the virus, and his want is to get her out of the kind of camp that she's in for sick people.
We sent her up there. Okay, I sent her up there. I would like to go get her back. That's why we have a plane with an isolation pod to bring our people in the field home when they're sick, right?
And he's thwarted in his attempts to evacuate her and to protect her, even though she was there because he sent her in.
You're asking me to spend a lot of resources on one person, and right now, I can't do that. Dr. Mears would agree with me.
He's thwarted, and in his being thwarted, he learns that Chicago is going to be put into quarantine.
What's going on, Lyle?
There's a sick congressman from Illinois in D.C. He was in Chicago over the holiday. They're using the pod to fly him home, then they're closing down Midway and O'Hare. The governor there is calling out the National Guard. They're setting up roadblocks. They're shutting down the Board of Trade, public transportation. Even the Teamsters are pulling their drivers off the road.
People are still going to slip through, you know.
Yes, they will. The Secret Service is moving the president underground. Congress is figuring out how to work online. When the word goes out, there will be a run on the banks, gas stations, grocery stores, you name it.
People will panic. The virus will be the least of our worries. It will tip over now.
We just need to make sure that nobody knows until everybody knows.
He makes the decision. That pressure pushes him to make a decision where he wants his fiancée to get out of town.
What are you talking about?
I want you to get in your car and leave Chicago. I want you to drive here to Atlanta, drive by yourself.
You do it. You do it now. Don't tell anyone and don't stop. And stay away from other people. You understand? Keep your distance from other people. Now, call me when you're on the road, Aubrey.
And that in itself spreads like a virus.
This flu stuff is really spooky. What does Ellis say?
He says it's serious.
What do you mean serious? Where are you?
I'm getting out of town.
What?
I'm gonna tell you something, and you're not gonna repeat it.
And part of the theme of this film is how media viruses, which is the name of the book, how media viruses spread. That in many ways what happens in the world that is bad is actually the contagion of panic. Panic is a form of a virus that spreads through the media. And he is ultimately confronted through that decision. I think he is... What happens to him? What's the consequence to that? He is found out.
So there's a really great scene where he comes up against the Jude Law character in a televised interview.
In 30 steps, it's 1 billion sick. 3 months. It's a math problem you can do on a napkin. And that's where we're headed. And that's why you won't even tell us the number of the dead, will you, Dr. Cheever? But you'll tell your friends when to get out of Chicago before anyone else has a chance.
They're looking for a scapegoat. You just made it easy.
The only reason we're not taking this to the Attorney General is because we can't replace you right now, but there's going to be an investigation. Do you understand that?
And that is one of the scariest things. Like you say, one of the themes of the film is about media. And this film, what year did it come out? Because it almost predicts where we're at in terms of a media cycle now, where if you have one piece of evidence that someone is not a perfect human being, that is trying to do or achieve or say is suddenly not valid. Yeah, it was really terrifying. Terrifyingly prescient. Do you want to talk more about the Jude Law character? Because he's, again, probably one of the more interesting ones. Because he's more of an antagonistic force himself, but also has his own sources of antagonism.
He's a conspiracy blogger. I can't remember the name of his blog, but hopefully I have examples where he talks about it. He catches wind early on about the disease when someone in Hong Kong dies from it.
Some say it was staged, an art project. Some say the authorities wouldn't do an autopsy, covered it up.
Cover what up?
We don't know. Maybe Minamata disease, from mercury in the fish. There've been outbreaks in the past. Fishing industry suppresses it. Industrial disease.
Yeah, but it's just one man. We don't even know
Just
what
one man
happened.
on video. Not everyone has the foresight to die in front of a camera. The ones we don't see worry me. Fish is shipped all over the world from there. Now, how many people read your paper over a plate of sushi every day?
You know, Alan, we have almost no freelance budget anymore, and after
You
each
wait
one end up
a few days. This will be tweeted and
We don't want to
YouTubed
be the paper that
all
cries
over
wolf.
the planet.
And then his blog, and he wants to get it published. It won't get published. He's thwarted. And that educates him that he needs to spread the information about it. And then he shows
chooses to profit from the epidemic.
So this is where we need your expertise. All the pharmaceutical stocks are already through the roof. But what's next? Where's the opportunity? Now, you saw that Shinko bus thing day one. That's why we wanted this meeting.
When I turned on my computer this morning, I had over 2 million unique visitors all looking for the truth. You think they want to see me talking to some hedge fund guy?
Mr. Crumweedy, we don't invent need here. We just analyze it, predict it. You tell me what it costs to look into your crystal ball.
You're familiar with Forsythia?
No, I'm not.
What I'm about to tell you is backed up by testimonials that will appear shortly in the popular media. I'll be talking about it extensively in the days ahead.
What does Forsythia do?
It's the cure.
And then he shows himself as sick. And then that he also then becomes recovered using a cure, like, is it homeopathic?
It's described as homeopathic.
My head hurts. My throat feels like it's closing. This is Forsythia. I've been taking it since the onset of the symptoms. If I'm here tomorrow, you'll know it works. Truth serum now, I'm Alan Crumweedy.
He encourages people to seek Forsythia. That leads to people panicking and overwhelming pharmacies trying to get hold of this thing.
We'll only be able to give out 50 doses today. That's our Forsythia allotment. That's... Hey, excuse me, there's a line here. Excuse me.
But then it is revealed to us that Alan, the Jude Law character, faked being infected in order to increase profits for companies selling Forsythia, in which he became a shared whole. I think he was a shareholder. Yep. So he basically used his position to increase, to commit securities fraud. But he is then bailed out by his supporters, who have raised funds to get him released.
I mean,
because he never. I don't think it's clear that he faked it. The question is whether or not he was immune, whether he was genuinely sick. He may have someone that had a natural immunity to it.
No, they says he never had any antibodies, so that they that he was never exposed to it. But they never address whether he believed he was sick or not, because he's one of those kind of conspiracy theorists who believes that every test is being, that the government is, any action by the government is inherently corrupt and cannot be trusted. So he doesn't trust the test that they've done proving that he's not sick. He doesn't trust the test that they've done on Forsythia proving that it doesn't work. He's, you know, the ultimate, the reason why the government puts resources into going after him at the end when they're still kind of in the middle of this crisis is because he's threatening to tell his followers to not take the vaccine.
Yeah. So he's definitely an antagonist there, but what's the pressure on him? The pressure on him is that he has a friend. I can't remember her name, from the newspaper where he originally tried to get his stories published. And then she is sick. And I think she's even got a child.
She's pregnant.
She's pregnant. So he's put under pressure because a friend of his from the newspaper at the beginning that he tried to sell the story turns up and she is sick and she is pregnant and she wants Forsythia. And he is given a choice about whether or not to give it to her.
What are you doing here?
I think I had a seizure. Oh.
I can't find any in the stores. I tried it.
Look, I don't have any here. People broke in.
I'm pregnant, Alan. I have money. I can give you some money.
Lorraine, you shouldn't be out. Go home. I'll bring it to you when I get it.
And he chooses to not give it to her. But she is the antagonistic force over those number of scenes until he dies, and then that is taken over by whoever is pursuing him for his illegal claims. But this is one of the strengths of the movie. He could have just been kept as a force of antagonism spreading disinformation, but they'd chosen to put him under pressure, and then he had to and force him to make a choice. And then it's not that he was thwarted or educated. I guess he's educated in the sense that he was willing to not give it to her. And we never know, is it because he's not willing to give it to her because he genuinely believes that Forsythia is keeping him alive? Or is he not willing to give it to her because he knows it's a placebo? In which case, why doesn't he give it to her? It's one of those things in hindsight, but really effective about him sitting up.
Or is he petty and just, you didn't help me when I needed help, why should I help you now? What's fascinating about, like, I just want to really bore down into something that you're saying is that when you're talking about what sources of antagonism he has, you're talking about pressures that make him make choices. And we've harped on a little bit about this in a lot of previous episodes, that the only way that you can truly demonstrate characters to an audience from a dramatic point of view is through the choices that they are presented with and what they make. And so, yeah, the pressures on him are those ones that make him choose.
And in the choices that are available to our man in All Is Lost are very small, in the sense that they're like, do you give up or not? They're very high contrast choices. And in the Grey, the Grey, the choices internally about how they, when Diaz chooses to defer to Otway, when they choose to defer to Otway, his choice to continue living, to go and get the wallets,
Yeah,
that's
and there's lots of
him.
mini obstacles as well, or mini goals.
Yeah.
Like, do we make a choice to head to the tree line or stay with the plane? How do we get down the cliff? Who's going to jump?
He makes a character choice. Speaking of character choices, I'm going to go to the Dr. Ali character, the Jennifer Eel character. She is the one, once she is given what's called an attenuated virus by another character who works at a private lab, which is a great little mini sequence, that there is the Elliot Gould character is ordered to destroy, no, he's a professor, isn't he? So the CDC asks all labs to destroy samples. He violates the orders. He makes this Dr. Ian character makes a decision to continue testing cell cultures using bat cells, and then he's able to get a breakthrough to do with something to do with an attenuated virus. This is all very well explained in the movie.
Yeah.
But then he gives this to.
I just because it's fresher in my mind. When the virus achieves, like, they realize how bad it is, they decide not to let anyone store samples of the virus unless they're in a lab of a certain caliber of security.
Yes, great. Yeah.
And that's why this doctor that you're talking about, sorry, I don't remember her character's name, she has to call this other private
Dr. Hextall,
and say, destroy your samples. He then chooses not to destroy the samples and is the first one to get a breakthrough in growing the virus, because they weren't able to grow it before, which meant they weren't able to experiment with it, they weren't able to test it, they weren't able to try and make a vaccine with it. So it was a nice little mini sequence.
And it puts pressure on him. Like, the fact is, they could have done this thing where they decided not to have that sequence, but where she has to call him, puts pressure on him. This minor character gets to make a choice, which is, do I destroy these samples or not? And he chooses not to, and that leads to a breakthrough that he gives back to her.
Dr. Sussman, I heard that they were shutting us down.
Now, I just have to deal with these samples.
If it's just a matter of destroying them, I can do it.
No, I'll take care of it. You go on home. I'll do that, and then I just want to recheck some data.
He grew it in a BSL-3. Allie, what the hell is he doing working with it in a BSL-3?
Ignoring me.
He's gonna publish. Shit. What does he want?
A box of cigars. He had a choice, Ellis. He could have gone into business for himself. There's no doubt he was approached, but he gave it to us.
And we're supposed to trust him.
We don't have a choice.
And Dr. Allie Hextall comes up with a potentially possible vaccination.
Can you get to the part where there's good news?
Now we have to try a live attenuated virus.
Like with polio?
Exactly. The only danger with a live virus is the possibility that it will revert to wild type and kill the host.
When will we know about that?
I'll ask the monkeys.
But the problem is she's concerned about the red tape, for lack of a better word, from infected patients.
If we even had a viable vaccine right now, we would still have to do human trials, and that would take weeks. And then we would have to get clearance and approval, figure out manufacturing and distribution. That would take months. And then train survivors to give inoculations. More months, more deaths.
So she chooses to inoculate herself with this vaccine. She literally injects herself with a vaccine, which if it doesn't work, given that a vaccine is a version of the virus, will kill her.
Yeah.
She's taking a huge risk. And she visits her father and tells him this great story.
What are you doing?
It's okay, Dad.
No, it's not okay.
Do you remember Dr. Barry Marshall? Thought that bacteria caused ulcers, not stress. Gave himself the bug and then cured himself. You taught me about him. I'm testing my vaccine.
This is different. I don't want to get you sick. Ellie, you can't take that chance.
Oh, Dad. You're here because you stayed in your practice treating sick people after everyone else went home. You took that chance. You took that chance every day.
It works. But she ultimately develops a vaccine. But then the film turns, this is what makes it so great. It's like, virus has been cured. Okay, now we have to deal with the logistics of distributing the vaccine, which puts pressure on society, which we've already seen to begin break down on a whole. And the Matt Damon character is kind of our point of view into the kind of degradation of the society in those particular cities that are decimated by the virus.
Yeah.
And the choices that then say, okay, Dr. Cheever, Lawrence Fishburne character, because he is given as a CDC member 2 vaccinations for him and his wife. And he makes a choice to give one to the son of a CDC janitor.
Yeah.
Because the CDC janitor protected him when he heard or overheard the Lawrence Fishburne's Dr. Cheever's phone call to his fiance to say get out of Chicago. Yeah. And so he makes a choice to help this guy. Right? And I'm actually getting slightly emotional about it now because it is a moment of selflessness. It says a lot about Dr. Cheever's character and them helping each other. And that only becomes because of the pressure of you have 2 vaccinations, this kid's way down the... These are all choices the writers have made to put characters under pressure, to force them to make decisions, to reveal the truth of who they are to the audience and I guess to themselves.
Yeah. I mean, you can study this particular film from a lot of different aspects, and I think we probably will come back to it in other examples. But
before we finish off, because I think we've dealt with all the main storylines, what about the Kate Winslet one? I mean, I think the fact that she dies is possibly more to do with raising the stakes for the audience more than her being pressurized and failing to make a choice. I don't think it's kind of more shows she's a victim in the ensemble.
Yeah, but Lawrence Fishburne's Cheever's character constantly says, like, are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating? Are you looking after yourself? She's portrayed as this character who's like fighting for the cause and not looking after herself.
How you doing?
Yeah, good. I'm going into a meeting with...
No, Mears, I didn't ask you what you were doing. I asked you how you were doing. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Fine. You know, I was in the field for about 15 years. I've seen a lot of shit. If you're not doing fine, you can tell me.
I mean, her dying moment, it's actually really beautiful and really well done, but it feels cliched. She's in this camp and the person in the bed next to her is shivering and feels cold and she's dying and she like throws off her blanket to try and give it to him or her coat. So, you know, again, she's given...
Yeah, that's pressure.
That's pressure. that's choice. It reveals character.
It does, but like, I mean, we're saying it's a cliche, but that moment, that person dying in the room next to someone who believes that they're a good person and fighting the good cause, she could have kept that coat, you know.
And this is, we've got so many things going on in this movie, but what I think it most clearly espouses is the thesis that what you've said is that the antagonistic forces need to be pressures and that generate choices that force...
You keep pressuring until they generate choices.
Yeah.
They either thwart your character or they educate them. But I think more specifically, they ultimately have to lead to choice.
Yeah.
I think the obstacles thwart the character or educate the character. I think the pressures result in choice.
Yeah. And I think
maybe that's a more clearer articulation of it.
Yeah. And I think with these, as I said, I don't think many of these characters go through a massive internal journey other than how the fuck do we save the world, and their different versions of that. It's a very external, plot-oriented film. It's amazingly well-paced and a very thematic film. But
I mean, I think what's interesting, but even like the Dr. Cheever character, him choosing to tell his fiancée, yeah, and then he betrays his professed values. So I do think his character is challenged and he fails. He puts his immediate needs to protect his fiancée over the needs of everyone else. So I think that is...
And it comes back, it's revisited later when he's exhorting the vaccine doctor to take her moment in the sun and she's like, you're going to get hung out to dry.
Take a bow, Allie. People have for a lot less.
It's not that hard to give yourself an injection. What about Mears or my father or you? I'm going to take a bow while you get hauled in front of Congress? What do I say when they ask about that?
You tell them that I told a loved one who told a loved one and that I'd do it again. Without you, Allie, you have saved millions of lives. That's a great story. It also happens to be true. Now, how often can you say that?
Yeah, and I think he realizes the truth of who he is.
Yeah,
and I think, like the Jude Law character realizes he's actually a piece of shit. He thinks at the beginning he talks about all these high-minded things about his blog and him trying to protect people, and he's not.
Does he realize that though? The film ends with him out on bail and going and interviewing people at the vaccine centers.
Whether he's not had agnosis, no, but the truth of who the character is revealed to us.
Yeah, to the audience, absolutely.
Whereas, I mean, I think this is more sophisticated than particularly All Is Lost in terms of character journey. And even the Grey, I mean, his decision to, as you say, to continue to fight is in contrast to his decision where he chose to not pull the trigger, but only slightly.
Yeah.
They're infected.
Infected!
Father.
Infected with what?
Oh, I shouldn't have done that.
It's the blood. There's something in the blood.
So what I was going to try and do, and by calling it out, it doesn't make it particularly elegant, you know, but most modern zombie films play it as a virus. So whether it's World War Z, I Am Legend, 28 Days Later, and even Zombieland. And what is interesting is they manifest it in a physical thing, right? And I think all of them, I mean, you know, Dawn of the Dead is probably the best at this in terms of the zombies. Walking Dead is all about human dynamics. The zombies are just a form of pressure to show how horrible humans are to each other.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah, absolutely.
The Walking Dead is pretty nihilistic. 28 Days Later, when you get to the soldiers and stuff, is all about that. But
unlike, so is the Mist as well.
Yeah.
And the Witch.
Okay, so
it's about,
let's talk briefly about The Witch.
Well, I think all of these different examples, and Annihilation as well, where you've got this, like Contagion, like the Grey, you've got this singular supernatural antagonistic force where people are trying to understand it, and in different ones, you know, World War Z they changed the ending from it being like, let's kill the zombies, to let's cure the disease. Let's find the vaccine, or the how do we deal with this. So they, I think the main
seething
difference,
mass of humanity in World War Z was the enemy.
The reason why we've lumped Supernatural in here, and I think there's different types of supernatural antagonists. The ones that we're lumping in here are really the ones that put immense pressure on a group of human beings to see how those human beings interact with each other and rise to the challenge of the antagonistic force. I think there are other supernatural movies like, there are vampire movies where quite often in vampire movies the point of view characters are the vampires, and they're other sentient beings, and it's about them grappling with immortality and their lust for destruction and all that kind of stuff.
Interview with the Vampire is more of a versus self film in a weird way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Versus self.
Lestat and
Werewolf
also
movies.
Louis. But when it's humans versus vampires, it's often the vampires become much more animalistic and much less...
Dusk Dawn.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Dusk Till Dawn or John Carpenter's vampires. So, and that's the same in The Witch.
What went we out into this wilderness to find? Leaving our country, kindred, our fathers' houses. For what? For the kingdom of God. Let us pray.
God, my Lord, I now begin. Oh, help me and don't leave my sin. For I repentant thou shalt be. From evil I will turn to thee. None ever shall destroy my faith. For I repentant thou shalt be. Oh God, my Lord, I now begin. Oh, help me and don't leave my sin. For I repentant thou shalt be. From evil I will turn to thee.
What is the evil of the wood?
The Witch, the actual supernatural force, you never understand what it really wants, other than it wants to drink baby's blood, and why it's torturing these people. These people definitely deserve torturing. Like, it's the very beginning is the trial of this man and his family being expelled from a Puritan community for being too puritanical. Like, he was too zealous for the zealots, and they're, in their banishment, they're this family that start turning on each other. But what is fascinating for me about the witch, and spoilers, is she is put under such pressure to the point where all her family dies. She has to kill her own father.
No, Catherine. No.
She's the same girl from Split.
Thomason. Yeah.
And she joins the witches. She becomes a witch. And at that point, that is the point where the witches stop becoming this supernatural force and actually become something that we understand. We're like, oh, they are this thing that has been created by people.
Oh, that's your interpretation.
Yes, that is my interpretation. Otherwise, why does it end with her taking all her clothes off and joining the cackling coven? What's the point of that ending?
Like the Crucible, it's about this antagonistic force, like literally Satan, which in this case is Black Phillip, but Satan is actually Hebrew for the adversary or the accuser. So in a way, it is the adversary, it's the antagonistic force. All of this is about sowing the seeds of distrust between the family, and the family destroys itself. So Thomason is the only one left, and she's put under so much pressure, she either gives in to Black Phillip or doesn't. And she does. I think ultimately, in terms of what we're talking about, all these supernatural forces conspire in such a way that she is pressured, constantly pressured to make a choice. She either has to confess to being a witch. Isn't that part of it? They convinced that she's a witch?
Yeah, but she's she's not. I mean, in the end, the family start blaming her for her. You know, the inciting incident is the witch stealing the baby while she was looking after the baby. And at first the family are like, yep, it's all on the witch. And then they're starting to be like, no, you're the witch to their own daughter. And, you know, that's triggered by the son getting lost and coming back and dying a very supernatural death. But I think what I want to draw attention to, like these class of films, is like the way that Contagion, the virus acts in a way that creates a thematic unity between the different stories and pressures that the characters are being put under. That is the same in a lot of these different supernatural films, where the zombies in Dawn of the Dead, like famously the criticism of consumerism because they all hole up in a mall, and as you said, the people are worse to each other than the zombies are, is very different to what the zombies are creating in 28 Days Later, which again makes the comment that the people are, you know, they end up in that castle with Mad Christopher Eccleston, and the people are worse than the zombies.
To quote Ripley from Aliens.
You know, Burke, I don't know which species is worse. You don't see them fucking each other over for a goddamn percentage.
But the point is, what you can do with your supernatural antagonist is force your protagonist into the position where they make the choice that is what your film is about. And I think all of these natural ones that we've explored, like that's what ties this class of supernatural antagonists with the class of the nature antagonists, is all of them are pushing these characters to that final culminating decision, which is a reflection of what the movie is about.
I don't think really got anything more to say about monster movies, which is what's Jaws or Pacific Rim or even Predator going to talk about it? I mean, I think we kind of talked about it at the beginning, because Supernatural it's kind of more when you're talking about the mist or the witch, you're talking about stuff that there are rules of the world, but they're a little bit, part of it is learning what those rules are. And, you know, zombies, whether it's killing them in the head or what the vaccine is, discovering the vaccine is basically a scientific version of learning the rules. Compared to The Woman in the Black or The Ring or any of those films.
Yeah.
Should we try to wrap this up with learnings?
Yes.
You're like, finally.
I mean, look, I have come, I think, somewhat more of a convert of your pressure thesis, mainly through our discussion of Contagion, but I like it as, how is the antagonistic force a pressure for making the protagonist make choices?
And I think it's not something that happens in every scene. I think you can have a series, the antagonistic versions might need to escalate. They need to increase the pressure until the character is forced to make a decision.
Or that the character is forced, as in All Is Lost and The Grey, where the protagonist is forced to make the exact same decision over and 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 over again until finally they make a different choice, and that makes that different choice all the more powerful.
Oh, one final thought that kind of occurred to me. In part one, I talked about my thesis at that point was probably less useful for writers, but so this is maybe an observation rather than a tool, which is, I was saying that the scene antagonist or the sequence antagonist or the act antagonist or the show antagonist, whatever it is kind of related to the central dramatic question. And I guess what's interesting about these nature films, even though they kind of seem to have really clearly articulated characters, is that almost all, if not all, the questions, the dramatic questions on a scene level or a sequence level are plot related. That's where the dramatic questions come from. Less so, there may be a character question that shapes the overall thing, like in All Is Lost and The Grey. And I guess there's kind of an character questions in Contagious. I just say Contagious and I get it right. Contagion. But it feels like that's actually a defining thing about the conflicts that come out of Versus Nature, is that they manifest themselves as plot questions.
exactly what you just said in terms of what are these nature antagonists keep posing plot questions of their characters, and the reason why they're plot questions is because it's not another person, it's not digging deep into the soul, but because, as we keep harping on about, the pressure that is forcing these protagonists to make decisions is revealing their character. And
I think that's actually a really good place for us to end, because it kind of leads to what we're going to be talking in the next episode, which is versus worlds and versus systems. We're going to be talking about, at this stage, Minority Report, Mudbound, The Lobster, and I think Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, at least for me. And I think what's interesting is they're constantly presenting those kinds of, it's not that they're moral questions, it's the character's worldview is being challenged. And it's how they react to it. The kind of antagonistic force, the pressure on them is on their worldview. And I think that's what's happening to the Matt Damon character, who forever should just be called the Matt Damon character, is that his worldview is being challenged and he is not thwarted. He's educated that he can remain moral, whereas the Jude Law character doesn't. He kind of succumbs to it. I mean, we could have actually done Contagion in systems, and I think it would have worked. But it's good that we've done it here because it kind of leads us elegantly into the next episode. So,
elegantly is a strong word.
It leads us awkwardly, as only we can, into the next episode for whenever that comes out.
Jack, this is all your fault.
Hey, we're nearly there. We're now over halfway. Fucking finally. So, many thanks to all our patrons for encouraging us, particularly our top tier patrons, Paul, Sandra, Rob, Christopher, Joachim, and Krob. You people are particularly awesome. You are the wind beneath our broken sail.
You are our internal antagonists, not necessarily our external antagonists.
I'm your external antagonist. And you know what's mine? My bladder.
Oh. Yeah, for those of you, we've edited out Stu peeing twice in what was supposed to be a shorter episode.
All right, stop.
I hope you all feel like arguing with either Stu or myself
about anything on this episode or anything in general.
And you can find many ways of getting in touch with us at our website at draft-0.com.
At the website, you'll also find the show notes for this and all our other episodes,
as well as links to support us and spread the word for free via a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
Very important for spreading the word.
Or if you think that what we do here is worth $1 or preferably more than $1, then you can also find links to our Patreon page to support us getting these episodes to you quicker. Thanks.
And thanks for listening.
Shut up! You still don't get it, do you? He'll find her. That's what he does. That's all he does! You can't stop him! He'll wait for you, reach down her throat, and pull her fucking heart out!
Doug.
Let go of me!